Hello, this is your host, Todd Lewis of the Praise of Folly podcast. This has been an episode that's been a while in the making. Quite a few people have been interested in my take on Conan, and part of it has been I wanted to do my due diligence in the takedown, quote unquote. So, just briefly, while people are filtering in, I've never liked the Conan character. Howard what he's good at is writing a kind of like fast-paced, punchy adventure style. But when you kind of like look beneath that, I think there's a lot to not like. And I think Conan is just the flagship character. All the other characters, like Kull or Solomon Kane or the others, they're derivative of the same kind of mindset. They're superior in my mind because they're not as animalistic and sensualist as Conan. But Conan really does have this cachet. He's never really been forgotten, unlike, say, Lovecraft and certainly Smith, who's never been recovered. We had the Conan movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, 87 or 86. And then we had the comics from Marvel in the 1960s. Conan has kind of always been with us. He's never really disappeared. So I think that was the most natural Howard story to focus on. So without any further ado, I am going to read my prepared presentation on the problems I have with Conan. Okay, full confession, I do not like Conan the Barbarian and never have. I believe he is a cartoon character that, along with the works of Edgar Rice Burroughs, shifts man's imaginative mind into impossible fantasies. That being said, I wanted to do my due diligence and read the man himself, Robert Howard, in his Conan the Barbarian stories. To that end, in 2024, I read 11 of the original Howard stories published in Weird Tales. Even though Howard published 17 stories in Weird Tales, this is more than adequate. I read The Phoenix on the Sword, The Scarlet Citadel, The Tower of the Elephant, Black Colossus, The Silvering Shadow, The Pool of the Dark One, Rogues in the House, Shadows in the Moonlight, Queen of the Black Coast, and The Devil in Iron, and The People of the Black Circle. With this body of work under my belt, I shall continue. So there are basically three Conan personas that develop in the stories I've read. The Honorable Conan, the Phoenix on the Sword, the Scarlet Citadel, the Tower of the Elephant, Black Colossus, and the People of the Black Circle. And by honorable, I mean he's upright, he stands up for the little guy, he fights people who are cutting corners and being bad. Again, the first one, the Phoenix on the Sword, is a good example of this. But then there's the psychopathic, heartless, or indifferent Conan. The Slithering Shadow, the Pool of the Dark One, where he literally waits and lies in wait and just straight up murders the captain of a ship. Rogues in the House, doesn't care who he's working for or doing what. And then Queen of the Black Coast, where he just is a pirate pillaging and killing people for their money. Lovable Rascal, Shadows in the Moonlight, and The Devil in Iron. And this will come into importance a little bit later as I continue with this account. So there's the sorcery rules, okay? Howard, in the very first Conan story ever published, The Phoenix on the Sword, establishes that human courage and weapons cannot defeat sorcery. The sage Epimetheus speaks to Conan in a dream, and I quote, "Loose your barbarian fury against your foes of flesh and blood," answered the ancient. "It is not against men I must shield you. There are dark worlds barely guessed by men, wherein formless monsters stalk, fiends which may be drawn from the outer voids to take material shape and rend and devour at the bidding of evil magicians. There is a serpent in your house, O king, an adder in your kingdom, come up from Stygia with the dark wisdom of the shadows in his murky soul. And his hair prickled at the nape of his neck, for on the broad blade was carven a symbol, the outline of a phoenix. And he remembered that on the tomb in the crypt he had seen what he had thought to be a similar figure carven of stone." We also learn that this dark evil is Set, and Set is worshipped in Stygia. Again, I quote, "All my life, which was as the lives of three common men, I fought him. I drove him into the shadows of the mysterious south. But in dark Stygia, men still worship him, who to us is the archdemon. As I fought Set, I fought his worshippers and his votaries and his acolytes. Hold out your sword." End quote. The wizard is Thoth Iman from Stygia, who worships the god Set. Clearly, Epimetheus is saying that Conan cannot defeat Thoth without the aid of his good rune. We see when Conan fights the monster that Thoth summoned, his axe blade bounces off the creature, and only when he picks up his broken sword with the rune does he kill the monster. This sets up all the rules of Conan for Howard to break one by one. As an extension of this rule in Rogues in the House, and I quote, "Who can delve the mind of a devil?" replied Murillo. "Our present interest is in getting out of this place. Human weapons cannot harm a wereman. How did you get in here?" End quote. Here Murillo is echoing what Epimetheus says. Now this is important, because the first two stories of Conan are Conan is king. All the others are him before he's king. So the fact that Murillo is already saying this should be, in the time dimension, seen as something said before Epimetheus, but reinforcing that broader theme. It must be remembered that Howard was part of a triumvirate of dissonant authors who included the well-known H.P. Lovecraft and the criminally unknown Clark Ashton Smith. Both of these men have a similar magic rule, that is, physical force cannot defeat magic. Lovecraft, and I quote, "Armitage speaking, we must follow it, boys." He made his voice as reassuring as possible. "I believe there's a chance of putting it out of business. You men know that those Whateleys were wizards. Well, this thing is a thing of wizardry, and we must be put down by the same means, the Dunwich Horror." Smith. Gaspard made a considerable quantity of the mixture, arguing that no mere finger pinch would suffice for the lulling of the gigantic charnel monstrosity. His guttering yellow candle was dimmed by the white dawn as he ended the Latin formula, a fearsome verbal invocation from which the compound would derive much of its efficacy. The formula, which called for the cooperation of Alastor and other evil spirits, he used with unwillingness, but he knew that there was no alternative. Sorcery could be only fought with sorcery. The Colossus of Yalorn. While we lack any direct textual evidence, the close relationship between these three men and the shared rule of magic must defeat magic can hardly be seen as a coincidence. This shows us, along with other themes, that Howard's work, especially with regards to Conan, cannot be seen as distinct from the cross-pollination with Lovecraft and Clark, further with the inclusion of Lovecraftian-style monsters. Unlike Lovecraft and Clark, Howard fails to keep to this rule and jumps all over the place. The second published story, The Scarlet Citadel, sort of holds to this rule, where Conan is imprisoned by the wizard Sotholanti and escapes the dungeon with the help of Peleus. In the first climactic battle, Conan does duel Sotholanti and severs his head. Losing lore break, he cannot win, according to Epimetheus, but ultimately Peleus, in the shape of an eagle, takes Sotholanti's severed head away to some unknown place. So, okay, lore continuity, sort of. First question, why was the magic runic phoenix sword not reforged? It is not mentioned in the Scarlet Citadel. Which again, that's what he needs to beat the dark forces of Set, right? Why did Conan attack the sorcerer Sotholanti with the prophecy of Why did Conan attack the sorcerer Sotholanti with the prophecy of Epimetheus, saying he could not without any magical runic inscribed sword? The rest of the stories I read are Conan pre-king, and the entire magical rule set is totally thrown out. In Black Colossus, Conan faces a 3,000-year-old sorcerer, Thurga Khotan. His sorcery is pretty lame. All he does is cast a line of fire to erupt in some 500 charging horsemen in his attack on Conan in a narrow defile. Notice, not undead or outer cosmic monstrosities that Epimetheus warned about. Then, after his army is routed, he steals Princess Yasmila and takes her away. It was Princess Yasmila who, with the guide of Mitra, chose Conan to lead her armies. Then Conan chases down the sorcerer and runs him through. Okay, what about Epimetheus? And you cannot beat magic with human might and iron. I guess Howard forgot. Oops. Then in the Slithering Shadow, pre-King Conan fights a demon named Thog in an underground tunnel who seems to be both physical and not physical, very vague. Again, no magic, rune sword. I guess Howard forgot about Epimetheus again. In The Queen of the Black Coast, we see that the Wereman rule is broken badly. Wereman, hyena men attack Conan, who of course kills them. Insert eye roll here. During the battle, we read this, quote, "Springing to his feet, he bent his bow powerfully and drove his last shaft point blank the great hairy shape that soared up at his throat. The arrow was a flying beam of moonlight that flashed onward with but a blur in its course. But the werebeast plunged convulsively in midair and crashed headlong, shot through and through. End quote. After the battle, we read this. Quote, Conan lifted his head, mechanically searching for the beast things that had been its slaves and executioners. None met his gaze. The bodies he saw littering the moon-splashed grass were of men, not beasts, hawk-faced, dark-skinned men, naked, transfixed by arrows or mangled by sword strokes, and they were crumbling into dust before his eyes. End quote. Well, too bad Conan didn't know that both Epimetheus and Murilo were wrong, and he could have killed what he thought was a were-thing and rogues in the house. Now, I suppose somebody might say, well, Murilo was wrong. But Murilo's not wrong in light of what we have established by Epimetheus. In fact, Murilo is echoing through his own experience what Epimetheus knows through, sage knowledge. So this whole magic and versus force is dubious. The most flagrant violation of all the rules of magic set by Epimetheus is in the people of the Black Circle. In a totally ridiculous tale, Conan and a few mercenaries led by Karim Shah invade the castle of Yimsa, a sorcerer, to rescue Princess Dev Yasmina. All Conan has is a magical girdle from the wizard's acolyte Kemsa. And this is worth reading in detail. Quote, the curse of Ysil on them, gasped Kemsa. Go, I am dying. Wait, take my girdle. He tried to fumble with a mangled hand at his tatters, and Conan, understanding what he sought to convey, bent and drew from his gory waist a girdle of curious aspect. Follow the golden veil through the abyss, muttered Kemsa. Wear the girdle. I had it from a Stygian priest. It will aid you, though it failed me at last. Break the crystal globe with the 4 golden pomegranates. Beware of the master's transmutations. I am going to Gitara. She is waiting for me in hell. Ya, Seklos Yar, and so he died. Stygia, close quote. Stygia, remember that? What god do the Stygian priests worship? Set. The evil Conan was supposed to defeat, but Howard lost track and all. Then, armed with the powers of Set, Conan defeats the wizards, and then at the end kills the master wizard, who was a vulture with a knife. Quote, the scimitar-like beak was slashing for the lady's soft neck, but Conan was quicker. A short run, tigerish leap, the savage thrust of a dripping knife, and the vulture voiced horribly human cry, pitched sideways and went tumbling down the cliffs to the rocks and river 1,000 feet below. As it dropped, its black wings thrashed the air. It took on the semblance not of a bird, but of a black-robed human body that fell, arms and wide black sleeves thrown abroad. With this lame bit of dialogue, we see an attempt to explain for why the girdle aided Conan and not Kemsa. Quote, are you a magician that you have conquered the black seers of Yimsa, Conan of Gore? She asked, as they went down the path with his heavy arm about her supple waist. It was a girdle Kemsa gave me before he died, Conan answered. Yes, I found him on the trail. It is a curious one, which I'll show you when I have time. Against some spells it was weak, but against others it was strong, and a good knife is always a hearty incantation. But if the girdle aided you in conquering the master, she argued, why did it not aid Kemsa? He shook his head. Who knows? But Kemsa had been the master's slave. Perhaps that weakened its magic. He had no hold on me as he had on Kemsa. Yet I can't say that I conquered him. He retreated, but I have a feeling that we haven't seen the last of him. I want to put as many miles between us and his lair as I can. Close quote. Now, this quote comes before the vulture attack, so the guy was still alive. The logic totally fails. Conan is supposed to fight Set, the world-devouring serpent, not use a trinket from one of his priests to defeat a wizard. The fact that Conan was not a slave would make the girdle work less for him, since Set wants slaves to worship him. This is such a cheap mess. Furthermore, the dagger isn't imbued with magical runes, like in the Phoenix. At this point, it is beyond doubt that Howard had no intent to keep any sort of continuity and just poached Lovecraftian horrors like Thothamon's Baboon and Thog as a gimmick to get people to read his books, and the magic involved was meaningless. Too bad Lovecraftian heroes can't just hack Cthulhu to pieces. Sigh. Physical combat. Physical combat is a joke. A really good example of this if one compares and contrasts Conan in Queen of the Black Coasts and Shadows in the Moonlight. In Queen of the Black Coast, Conan is kitted out with steel armor and a sword. He cuts through the naked Negro pirate crew of Belit. I'm willing to give Howard this, since the man in steel armor with a sword is more than a match for scores of men without. I think the conquistadors in Mexico. Yet this rule is totally reversed in Shadows in the Moonlight, where Conan, naked but for a thong, roughing it in the marshes, takes on Shah Amaruth, kitted out in a similar getup to the one Conan used against Belit's crew. Quote, he was a tall man, slender but hard as steel. From head to heel he was clad in light, silvered mesh mail that fitted his supple form like a glove. In spite of the terror of his wild appearance, Olivia looked to see him fall at the first crossing of the blades. Madman or savage, what could he do naked against the male chief of Akif? We also know that, okay, so that's a close quote. We also know that Shah Amaruth was a great warrior. A week ago, Shah Amaruth trapped us near the banks of the Ilbars with 15,000 men, Mitra. The skies were black with vultures. When the lines broke after a whole day of fighting, some tried to break through to the north, some to the west. I doubt if any escaped. The steppes were covered with horsemen riding down the fugitives. I broke for the east and finally reached the edge of the marshes that border this part of Valiet. That's Conan speaking. So we have the same situation, only far better for Shah Amaruth. He is not surrounded by scores of naked warriors, and but is felled in one attack by Conan. This is total fantasy. Why didn't Conan get taken by Belit and her crew? Through the magic of plot armor, given that Howard has no rules for sorcery, it is no surprise he has no rules for physical combat either. This little bit is truly ridiculous. In The Devil on Iron, we read this. Quote, then he was writhing on the glass steps with a fold after slimy fold knotting around him, twisting, crushing him. His right arm was still free, but he could not purchase it to strike a killing blow, and he knew one blow must suffice. With the groaning convulsion of muscular expansion that bulged as his veins almost to bursting on his temples, and he tied his muscles in quivering, tortured knots. He heaved up on his feet, lifting almost a full weight of that 40-foot devil. So Conan is being constricted by a python, and he lifts overhead presses of 40-foot python. This is an account of Conan being attacked. A snake of that length would be anywhere from 1,600 to 2,000 pounds. So according to Grok, quoting Grok, the most weight a man has ever lifted overhead in a verified competition is 267 kilograms or 588.6 pounds, achieved by Georgian weightlifter Lasha Talakadze. This record was set in the clean and jerk, a two-part Olympic lift where the barbell is pulled from the ground to his shoulders, clean, and then thrust overhead, jerk, at the 2021 World Weightlifting Championships in Tashkent, Uzbekistan on December the 7th, 2021. Talakadze, competing in the plus 109 kilogram weight class, completed a 267 kilogram clean and jerk as part of a 492 kilogram total, 225 kilogram snatch plus 267 kilogram jerk, cementing his status as the heaviest lifter in the Olympic-style weightlifting history to date. Now, this is 2021, so as of the 1930s, I don't think anybody was overhead pressing over 500 pounds. So it would have been a much lower number. And I didn't ask Grok if Lasha was using PEDs. Most of these competitors do, which might have only just been getting involved in weightlifting in the 30s. Yeah, Conan is not going to lift 3 or 4 times what this Talakadze can do. Furthermore, the male human body with its bone density, musculature, and tendon strength cannot endure such weight. This really highlights what a cartoon character Conan is. This is the worst kind of escapist fantasy. As I said before, for the sake of a story, I would accept the power of a god, demon, or spirit indwelling or imbuing Conan with strength. But Howard does not give us this option. Conan is all natural, as they say. Okay, let's see. Conan's character. What's up next? Yeah, okay. Okay, a hero needs a weakness, an Achilles' heel, and Samson his hair. Both Hercules and Samson are dominated by women. Conan has no weaknesses. He never gets taken out by a femme fatale or relative of someone he killed. Conan's strength is superhuman. Without a divine source, it is just ridiculous. Conan makes no claim to a patron deity, nor does he claim Crom gives him supernatural power. Just as Crom trains a man how to fight and win at battle. He tells the pirate queen Belit in Queen of the Black Coast this, quote, "Their chief is Crom. He dwells on a great mountain. What else to call on him? What use to call on him? Little he cares if men live or die. Better to be silent than to call his attention to you. He will send you dooms, not fortune. He is grim and loveless, but at birth he breathes power to strive and slay into a man's soul. What else shall men ask of the gods?" Close quote. In the same discourse with Belit, we get Conan's motivations for life. Quote, "I know this. If life is illusion, then I am no less illusion. And being thus, the illusion is real to me. I live, I burn with life, I love, I slay, and am content." Close quote. Conan is not a man, but an animal. If we are going to talk about Spenglerian cycles, decline, and the Kali Yuga, this kind of attitude is clearly decadent to the most extreme degree. In at least two stories, The Pool of the Black One and The Queen of the Black Coast, Conan is clearly shown as a psychopath. In The Pool of the Black One, Conan straight up murders the ship's captain in a premeditated ambush. In Shadows in the Moonlight, Conan challenges another pirate captain for his ship, but engages in a duel, presumably within the pirate code. The real kicker to the murdering of the captain in The Pool of the Black One is that the captain was leaving his crew to follow one of the inhabitants of the island who had kidnapped a shipmate. By the time Conan is done murdering the man, the boy has been captured and will shortly be turned into petrified bone in the green pool. The captain is said to have been a veteran of many decades of sailing, so his presence would have been a great assistance to Conan and the crew in fighting the Black Ones who ravaged the crew. The entire story is a very morally dark and corrupting narrative. The morality of the story, kids, is if you murder a man, you get a ship, crew, and woman, and never and avoid near disaster. That was your own fault. We see casual murder again when Conan in Rogues in the House is walking up the stairway to an apartment where his former lover lives, who ratted him out, and bumps into the new man she is with walking down the stairs. Conan just murders him on the stairs. Okay, criminal code, pirates code, you snitch on me, I'm going to take you out. This is just some random guy in the hallway. Well, he's dead. In The Queen of the Black Coast, we also see murder glorified. While trying to shield a friend from investigation, Conan kills the judge leading the investigation. He then joins a merchant vessel and threatens to kill them all if they do not let him sail with them. Then when the same merchant vessel is attacked by pirates, he initially fights for their defense. And then when on the pirate ship, sides with Belit and her crew after her entreaties. I know what people are going to say. Well, Conan has to side with Belit. He had no choice. As threadbare as that is, we have his becoming her lover. I mean, you become the lover of the woman whose pirates killed your crewmates? I guess that makes sense since he was threatening to kill them himself at the beginning of the journey. The moral perversity of all this is clear. Imagine Achilles, Ajax, Hector, or Aeneas doing these things. Someone will then look at the times Conan did help people, the Tower of the Elephant, and the elephant hybrid creature, the Black Colossus, etc. I argue that this merely shows that there are at least two Conans, the psychopathic murderer and the friend of the little guy. It hardly needs telling that they cannot be the same man. Anti-civilization. There's a lot of quotes here, so I'm not going to even mention the quotes here. The Phoenix on the Sword. The men faltered, wild, criminal, and dissolute though they were, yet they came of a breed men called civilized, with a civilized background. Here was the barbarian, the natural killer. They shrank back. The dying tiger could still deal death. Shadows in the Moonlight. Her lip twisted in a bitter smile. Aye, civilized men sell their children as slaves to savages sometimes. They call your race barbaric, Conan of Chimera. The Tower of the Elephant. The Chimeran glared about, embarrassed at the roar of mocking laughter that greeted this remark. He saw no particular humor in it, and he was too new to civilization to understand its discourtesies. Civilized men are more discourteous than savages because they know they can be impolite without having their skulls split as a general thing. He was bewildered and chagrined and doubtless would have slunk away abashed. But the Kothian chose to goad him further. Again, from the Tower of the Elephant, he did not trouble his head about them. He knew that Zamora's religion, like all things of civilized, long-settled people, was intricate and complex, and had lost most of the pristine essence in a maze of formulas and rituals. He had squatted for hours in the courtyard of the philosophers, listening to the arguments of theologians and teachers, and came away in a haze of bewilderment, sure of only one thing, and that they were all touched in the head. No civilized man could move half so quickly as the barbarian moved. That he did not instantly explode in a burst of murderous frenzy is a fact that measures his horror, which paralyzed him where he stood. A civilized man in his position would have sought doubtful refuge in the conclusion that he was insane. It did not occur to the Chimeran to doubt his senses. He knew he was face to face with the demon of the elder world, and the realization robbed him of his faculties except sight. The slithering shadow. The chance for life had lent fresh vigor and resilience to the Chimerian's steely thews. He strode out across the sandy waste as if he had just begun the journey. A barbarian of barbarians, the vitality and endurance of the wild were his, granted him survival where civilized men would have perished. Rogues in the house. When asked by Merlot to kill the priest Nabonidus, and Conan responds, the Chimerian show no sign of surprise or perturbation. He had none of the fear or reverence for authority that civilization instills in men. King or beggar, it was all one to him. Nor did he ask why Merlot had come to him, when the quarters were full of cutthroats outside prisons. I smelled the perfume you put on your hair when you came to my cell, answered Conan. I smelled it again a while ago, when I was crouching in the dark and preparing to rip you open. Merlot put a lock of his hair to his nostrils. Even so, the scent was barely apparent to his civilized senses, and he realized how keen must be the organs of the barbarian. Queen of the Black Coast. He was a valiant trencherman, and strong drink was a passion and a weakness with him. Naive as a child in many ways, unfamiliar with the sophistry of civilization, he was naturally intelligent, jealous of his rights, and dangerous as a hungry tiger. Speed, super speed, courage, reflexes, and this just smells like magic. For good account of knowledge built from instinct, and this is the key thing here, instinct, right? What's Howard appealing to? Instinct, knowledge of the blood, primal aspects. We have Jack London's White Fang and Call of the Wild. The dogs are superior for their kind, but not magical. And with the law of the club, learn never to attack humans, at least not in most cases. Compare this with Conan attacking demons and supernatural creatures. Instinct would tell you to not do this. For example, in White Fang, man is seen as a god from the dog's POV, and his instinct tells him not to attack them. White Fang is nearly killed by the bulldog and needs the assistance of a human to save him. Real instinct would tell Conan to flee supernatural forces. In the same way that the dogs, again, apex of their kind, according to London, still, understand where they are in the pecking order. Also, all this posturing about civilization and justice. Conan just straight up murders a man in the pool of the Black One, rogues in the house, and the Queen of the Black Coast, respectively. So yeah, I guess you won't like judges then, would you? Anti-civilizational tendencies are what we associate with the left and the enemies of order. That Howard has so many of these tendencies is deeply troubling. Adding to this Conan's penchant for murder, not self-defense, not fighting a battle, but cold-blooded murder, this is very dark. Travels. The wide-ranging travels of Conan, and this is the problem with most pulp stories, is that they transplant modern technological modes of transportation into some distant past. There was no way that a single man could have traveled from Chimera to the far southern jungles of what would be sub-Saharan Africa to Gulistan and Vendaya, Afghanistan and India, along with all the lands between. This could have only been done in the earliest age of sail. Not even Alexander, Caesar, or Genghis Khan traveled this much. We see that Howard, like many others, cannot see that this kind of globe-trotting is impossible before at least the age of sail, if not steam. While the pulp genre demands ever more varied settings, this cannot be done convincingly without modern transport technology. Which is why I guess it works better for PIs or something, or military veterans in like World War II, because you actually have the mechanism. When Conan is not a hetman of a horde or a pirate captain, he often travels alone. The idea that he can live off the land in all the various biomes he travels to and not die of exposure is ridiculous. Back to Jack London, even men inured to the cold and hardship in his To Build a Fire can't make it. A lone man travels out in minus 75 degree Fahrenheit weather. He is warned to not go alone. He freezes to death. Death would be Conan's eventual fate if he kept traveling alone like he does. But hey, we have plot armor, so. Travels the world by foot, horse, and boat. Fights spiritual beings without magic runes. Is never in danger of death. Has no weaknesses. Conan is a cartoon character and not to be treated as such. Not some sort of model to emulate. this brain damage Pulp has done to the American man is palpable. The left keeps winning because American men think they are living in a cartoon where they can just act like Conan and defeat the baddies. This kind of infantile thinking needs to be rejected and overturned before anything better can come. If we look at the objective failure of the merits of the Conan character and stories, one could steelman Howard's work and ask, quote, what mythopoetic properties does Conan possess that gives him such an enduring success, close quote. Well, if we look at the work of Thomas Carlyle in the Signs of the Times, we read, quote, for the plain truth, very plain we think, is that minds are opposed to minds in quite a different way. And one man that has a higher wisdom, a heretofore unknown spiritual truth in him, is stronger not than 10 men that have it not, or than 10,000, but than all men that have it not, and stands among them with quite ethereal and angelic power, as with a sword out of heaven's own armory, sky-tempered, which no buckler, no tower of brass will finally withstand, close quote. The idea of one mind, one heroic principle, overcoming all is universally recognized principle, and Howard's Conan could be seen as an overly materialist expression of this principle. The problem is Howard fails to appreciate the distinction Carlyle makes. Bodies do not relate to bodies in this way, as we see in the words of Cominius in Shakespeare's play Coriolanus, in speaking to Coriolanus to leave Rome to flee the angry mob. Quote, but now 'tis odds beyond arithmetic, and manhood is called foolery when it stands against a falling fabric, close quote. Both Shakespeare and Carlyle realize that one man against 10 is bad, but one man against 100 is the end of the road. Even at times, Howard admits this himself. For example, in The People of the Black Circle, we have Conan run into 500 Afghulis warriors whom he was supposed to command, but who view him as a traitor for leading to the death of their chieftain. Quote, the old chief brandished his arms and got to the floor again. They were not hanged, he screeched. A Wazuli in another cell saw them die. The governor sent a wizard to slay them by craft. That must be a lie, said Conan. The governor would not dare. Last night I talked with him. The admission was unfortunate. A yell of hate and accusation split the skies. Ah, you went to him alone to betray us. It is no lie. The Wazuli escaped through the doors. The wizard burst in his entry and told the tale to our scouts when he met in Zahabar. They had been sent forth to search for you when you did not return. Why? When they heard the Wazuli's tale, they returned with all haste to Gore, and were settled our steeds and girt our swords. And what do you fools mean to do? Demanded the Cimmerian. To avenge our brothers, they howled. Death to the Kshatriyas. Slay him. Brothers, he is a traitor. Arrows began to rattle around him. Conan rose in his stirrups, striving to make himself heard above the tumult. And then with a roar of mingled rage, defiance, and disgust, he wheeled and galloped back up the trail. Close quote. Here we see that Conan backs down from impossible odds. But again, it is the inconsistency of Howard that kills this. Conan cannot be tasked with fighting the evil Set and then use Set's magic. He cannot fight magic with physical force, but fights magic with physical force all the time. He cannot, in other cases, beat impossible physical odds with his physical strength. At best, Howard is a schizophrenic writer. Neither Lovecraft or Smith have this problem. The broader mental issues with Howard are shown in his tragic suicide. While it can be seen as a cheap shot to undermine a man's work by appealing to mental illness, I hope to have already shown that the wild inconsistencies of his work are not the result of a sound and coherent mind, unlike Lovecraft and Smith. Add to this his suicide, and you see a very troubled man. Well, all three writers are escapist, and writing from the perspective of male protagonists who are beset by foes on all sides and need to find some way to escape. In many of Smith's and Lovecraft's stories, they don't. They either die or go mad. And when escape is made, it is based on lore, sorcery, wits. Howard is more of a power fantasy where instead of relying on arcana, wisdom, lore, he relies on Hulk smash to solve his problems, which indicates an origin in a place of uncertainty and insecurity. One could argue Lovecraft himself was also insecure, but he sought a more constructive outlet in dreams with his dream cycle, specifically the Silver Key and Through the Gate with the Silver Key, and the search for lore to gain power over occult forces, such as the Dunwich Horror, Shadow over Innsmouth, and the case of Charles Dexter Ward. Reason and knowledge put the night monsters down, not Hulk smash. The other problem is absent divine power for his prowess and strength we see in the Queen of the Black Coast. We could steelman Howard's case with the idea of a Kensei, or sword saint. In samurai lore, a Kensei is a master warrior who is able to take on many men by himself. One of the most famous Kensai is Miyamoto Musashi and his famous duel with the Yoshioka family who ran a fencing school. Yoshioka Mata Shihiro and possibly as many as a dozen or 20 retainers laid an ambush for Musashi. Musashi, catching wind of this, ambushed Yoshioka Mata Shihiro, first killing him and then fighting his way out. Such a feat appears almost superhuman. If one accepts the ideas of Kensai and other great heroes, why object to Conan? Well, the problem is when one reads the Book of Five Rings. Musashi's martial artist work and other samurai works such as Yaguya Minonori's The Life-Giving Sword, or works on mental focus such as Takuan Soho and His Unfettered Mind. The formation of a Kensai is the product of not only strict physical training, which Conan has in abundance, living a hard life, but mental focus, which Conan clearly lacks. In the Book of Five Rings, Musashi states, quote, "Do not let yourself be guided by the feeling of lust or love," close quote. Clearly, Conan fails this test, as he is a self-described sensualist in The Queen of the Black Coast. So even here, the failure is that Howard is cheating. Conan is given the power of one possessed by a god or spirit at his most powerful, or the powers of a martial artist adept like a Kensai at his least powerful, and fails to give a compelling account of how such a thing came to be. Or to put it another way, Sherlock Holmes in The Study in Scarlet defines analytic reasoning as the ability to observe a reality and then construct a chain of events that either led to or probably led to it. In literature, all results are the result of the author's will. It would not be there if he did not wish it to be there. What makes an author good or bad is how well he reasons analytically by giving a plausible account of the desired result. In this case, is Conan's prowess sufficiently explained? No. He has power over magical beings without magic, violating the rules set in The Phoenix on the Stone. Does he exhibit the physical training necessary for prowess? I would argue yes. Howard argues that a rough frontier life of growing up in Chimera, which is a harsh environment. I can give Howard that. Huns, Mongols, Arabs, and Vikings all grew up in harsh climes and were great warriors. Does Conan exhibit the mental training necessary to be a Kensai? Clearly not. He is a sensualist and decries learning, quote, "Let teachers and priests and philosophers brood over questions of reality and illusion," close quote. He lacks self-control and gives little indication of the self-possession necessary from the mastery of the sword. We can say that of the three things that could be appealed to for Conan's prowess, divine power, physical power, or mental focus, Howard only provides one of the three, physical prowess. Physical prowess is totally unsuitable to fight magic, and even against other physical threats, you cannot blindly run into hordes of men alone. Even Alexander, Caesar, and Genghis Khan led armies and had bodyguards. In short, Conan fails because Howard is widely inconsistent in applying his own rules and fails to give a plausible account of Conan's prowess in battle against ludicrous odds. This brings me to the crux. My objection to Pulp as a literary art form is that it is a simulacra and delusion engine. Why do we see on the right objection to feminism and transgenderism in art? Fundamentally because they are not reality-based modes of thought. For example, physics and biology are ignored. Right? You can't say that the, G.I. Jane action hero of a third wave feminist story ignores physics, which I hear all the time on the right, and then say Conan doesn't have to abide by physics. No, that's not how it works. Women are not as strong as men, and men cannot change their biological sex status. When the woke came from movies and comics, besides just bad storytelling, another major objection was just how implausible the feminist or transgender characters and situations were. I would broadly agree with these critiques, but where did this trend of total disconnection from reality and crazy town fantasyland originate? That I can answer in one word: pulp. Whether it is the lore continuity problems with physical force-based magic, or the physics violation of Conan lifting a 40-foot serpent, or Conan never suffering an STD despite all the women he's with a total lack of moral karma in the Conan universe, how is this not trans at its core? How is this not a fundamental rejection of reality in a way that is cool only because it is masculine and macho? It's just not cool when it's a 100-pound woman doing it as G.I. Jane, or some moody, gender-confused Apache contemplating Apache's current gender identity. Sure, Conan is definitely cooler than these alternatives, but all of these are trans, and that they seek to liberate mankind from any limits and brain damage readers and viewers by offering them a reality in which it seems possible when in fact it can never be. Beginning with Edgar Rice Burroughs and his Tarzan and John Carter stories, and Howard with Conan Cole and Solomon Kane, we see the science signal drift towards simulacra and the origin of the trans mentality in fiction. In short, Conan is trans. All right, that is today's show. Wandering Panda, hello. Corbin, hello. Milton Walker, hello. Victorian Time Traveler, hello. Salmonfish, hello. All right. Let's see what we got in here, guys. Wandering Panda, spicy title. Yeah, it is spicy, but it's kind of like middle of the road. I didn't want to be like overly confrontational. That wasn't my point. Corbin, I love the 1990s Conan cartoon, Conan the Adventurer. There was a Phoenix too, and scaly dudes from another world. Well, you know, there you go. Okay, Victorian Time Traveler. This is actually a good quote. One of my favorite scenes in the accountant story is, I think, what was called the Hall of Mirrors or the Tower. Now, that's Rogues in the House you're talking of, but we'll get to that. When a magician is gloating about how easily he'd kill the thieves, and then he's unexpectedly kills them by throwing a stool that breaks the sorcerer's neck in the middle of his monologue. But see, that was actually funny, because what Conan is doing is subverting the monologue trope of evil bad guys. And the other two guys, Merlot and the other guy, forget his name, didn't see this coming. But Conan just throws a chair at him. So that was kind of funny in that it subverted an already established trope. But okay, I mean, don't care, Pulp is still awesome. Okay, well then I guess that's just trans. Moving on. Victorian Time Traveler. If life is as the Stygian skeptics oh, there we go, yeah. Now, what we can say, again, this isn't a attack on Howard personally, or his even style. Because he has a fast-paced, punchy, action-packed style of writing, which can definitely draw you in. But you see, that's sort of where it stops. You have to, if you keep thinking about what's going on, it all starts to break down in a way that Lovecraft doesn't. And if you've read Clark, he doesn't either. For example, I recommend his Authorial series, as well as Zothique series. Authorial is a kind of like mystical magic fantasy French province, which has like its history and it's cool. And then Zothique is some future post-apocalyptic medieval setting. So the other thing then is these are tight, well-organized accounts. And I could have quoted more examples from Lovecraft or Clark about the magic rule. But in Authorial, it comes up again at least one other time, maybe more. And so you definitely see this rule being kept to. Record Deepness. I've been listening to some of the Authorial series. Thanks for the recommend. It's great. I mean, Clark is excellent. He's got like a Mars series. I mean, this guy should really be. He's kind of between Lovecraft and Howard. Like Lovecraft, he does a lot of like, outer world, outer darkness, madness, and like what we might call magic. But he also, like Conan or Howard, has like very descriptive word pictures that are very whereas Howard focuses on describing action, Clark focuses on describing what you see. He's a word picture painter, like the environment, the people. Not so much on what they do, he can describe that well too, but yeah. Oh, Salmonfish, that's right, you're in here too. I see an improper portrayal of masculinity, timely and pertinent. Thank you. Let's see. Where was I saw another Salmonfish take. Conan is plot armor masquerading as indomitable manliness. Oh, that's it. That's the quote, guys. Here we go. Right for Salmonfish. Conan is plot armor masquerading as indomitable manliness. I think that's the summary of the whole video. So thanks, Salmonfish. Victorian time traveler. Sorry, I only just came in right here at the end, so I didn't hear your whole build-up. So I'm sure you've already addressed this, but I don't think Howard intends his first works to be taken literally. Well, I don't know exactly how Howard meant his works to be taken, but the readership today does. I mean, for example, I'll give you an example. You could LARP as Achilles and conquer an empire, right? Alexander the Great was reputed to have slept with the Iliad under his pillow and devotionally read it. And he conquered an empire, right? Because whether you think Achilles was an actual historical figure or an expression of what we might call the true myth, he's definitely expressing something real. And so by embodying that reality, Alexander the Great carves out an empire. If you were to like imitate Superman or Batman, you're not going to get very far in life unless your career is basically being a Comic-Con nerd or something, in which case it might. Conan falls into that same category. And that's what people today do. It's like, well, I mean, okay, I grew up, I want to be Superman, I want to be Conan, I want to be Batman. It's like, well, it's all the same to me. Let's see. Record deepness. I especially like the one where the monk was sent back in time and the witch sent him too far forward on purpose. That was an extremely clever story by Clark, using sorcery and time travel and the sorceress. You know, that was a very clever story. I appreciated that. Ryan Young, you guys are killing me low. I love Conan. I was going to get into the novels, and I have The Coming of the Chimera on my bookshelf waiting for me. So, and also this also is a part of a broader effort to push Lovecraft to the top. Maybe I should do a follow-up video on why Lovecraft is awesome, and also why Clark is awesome, because most people don't know about Clark. And we could do like a triumvirate video. This is my, attack on Howard, if you will. I could also talk about Lovecraft and Clark, especially Clark. He really got shafted. I don't know why. His stuff's great. Ryan Young, Lovecraft is probably better. Yes. Salmon fish. It's not meme magic. Meme magic focuses on what is real. They believe in transgressing impossible bounds by hallucination and social insistence. But even the mind has its forms. Corbin, sounds like 2 great videos ideas, sir. Yeah, you could make it a trilogy. You know, the edgy, 1930s author trilogy, because they all were friends. They all wrote together. They all cross pollinated. So, yeah, I mean that's certainly a thing. And I think the reason why Conan and Howard never got forgotten in a way that Lovecraft did, and Howard or Clark still is because an American reading audience just can't really handle esoteric high ideals, which I'm not saying that's all Lovecraft or Clark write about, but it's a pretty big part of their focus. Whereas there's a kind of like punchy earthiness and sort of like sensuality in the Howard works that just, don't, that are more applicable to a LCD reading audience. But I will say, too, this is a non-Conan work. Howard wrote. The other thing is the structuring of the stories. I didn't get into that because that wasn't really as important as the key objections I had. But he is capable of writing a tight story that has a really good flow to it. So, for example, in his story Black Canaan, where there's a slave revolt in the bayous or something, he has this really nice progression where there's kind of like a summoning principle in the magic ritual where everybody's summoning everybody else. And it turns out that, everything that happens at the end was the result of all of these tensions built upon each other, and it's resolved in a very satisfactory way. So it's not that Conan or Howard can't do that. He can. But at least in this case, I don't think he does. So spoiler alert, but this is why I'm telling you this. This is why I like, at least more than Conan, his story Black Canaan. The main guy, the main protagonist, is sort of like cast in a spell by a femme fatale witch, and he can't break free, but he has a friend that's following him who's not under the spell. And his friend shoots the witch. Even though he dies later, the main character is freed from the spell, not by his own effort. He's stuck. He's been seduced, if you will, by the spell. But this other guy saves him. Right? Conan doesn't need saving. It doesn't happen to Conan. It doesn't have to happen. So yeah, there's that. Victorian time traveler. I have a very odd story related to this. When I was preparing to serve as a missionary for my church, I was sent to a psychologist for an evaluation. He asked me what books I liked to mention. I mentioned that I just finished reading the compilation of the Conan stories, and he marked on his report that I was mentally unfit simply because I mentioned Conan. Oh man, I mean, I wouldn't disagree. I'm so sorry, Victorian time traveler. Strength in numbers. All right, everyone. It's been I think a really good show. I'm glad we got the turnout we did. I'm glad people were edified by it. And yeah, I think this will be a springboard for a broader discussion, not just on Howard's work, but also H.P. Lovecraft and Clark. I'm probably going to do Clark next because Lovecraft is too well known. He's saved the best for last, but Clark definitely needs to get some love. And I've read all the Averoigne and quite a bit of Zothique, so there's enough to work with. This is Todd Lewis of the Praise of Folly podcast, signing off.